Boing. Holy crap.
Hey guys, in honor of our starting Darksiders this week, we elected to do a lore video from that franchise, specifically on the origin and history of the race to which the Four Horsemen all belong. The Darksiders universe version of the Nephilim. We'll go over their origins, history, and long-term effect on the universe of the Darksiders franchise.
Okay, so to begin with, as in most fictional realities, the Nephilim are the end result of combination of both angels and demons. A story that may sound familiar to viewers who have played things like Diablo 3 or who have seen our lore video on the history of Diablo's world. A fact that shouldn't be terribly surprising, as the stories of Nephilim come from biblical references. And while all accounts of biblical Nephilim that we've been able to find involve mingling of angels and mortal humans, most fiction instead cast Nephilim as the offspring of angels and demons. Thus, this particular thread of species origin will be fairly common whenever Nephilim are looked into, no matter what fiction you're researching. One thing about the Nephilim's race's origin in Darksiders that differs from those in other stories, however, is how the first of their kind was created. Now, before we get into that, it should be noted that like many pieces of history and world building in the Darksiders franchise, the exact origin and even age of the Nephilim has a couple of different conflicting versions, both of which we'll go over in this video. In earlier released references to the Nephilim, it is stated that the Nephilim can be counted among the Old Ones, which is simply a collective term for any race of beings that existed before the peoples of the three kingdoms, angels, demons, and humans, known in this interpretation as creation's first warriors. Older even than the archangels, the Nephilim were known to have fought ferociously against the darkness, but were eventually banished from quote-unquote the light, for being too flawed and corruptible, thus vulnerable to evil and darkness.
The second version of the Nephilim's origin, the one recounted in Darksiders 2, and as the more recent of the two descriptions, as well as the one appearing in an official game, the one we consider more likely to be canon, involves the demoness Lilith. Lilith is an old and powerful demon known for manipulation, craftiness, and seduction. She has hatched many plans over the millennia. One such scheme even involved the events that would lead to the destruction of mankind in the first Darksiders game. Eons before humanity even took its first steps, however, Lilith seduced and became the paramour of a maker by the name of Golbanon, and used the relationship to learn from him the secrets of creating, shaping, and yes, making life. Gifts for which all makers, who are basically giant magic dwarves, are known. Using this knowledge, Lilith created the Nephilim, only instead of seducing an angel to do the job, as one might expect in these sorts of origins, Lilith instead took remnants, dust, if you will, of both angels and demons, and, using the knowledge she had gained from her time with Golbanon, mystically infused the two opposing substances together, creating the very first Nephilim, Absalom. In this version of the race's origin, the rest of the Nephilim rose in the years that followed, with the phraseology being somewhat vague and again mildly conflicting, so it's not entirely clear whether Absalom somehow spawned his brethren, or, as the text might suggest, other angels and demons were somehow compelled to copulate and thus create more Nephilim. Although there are references marking both Absalom and Death, the eldest of the Horsemen, as being among the firstborn of the Nephilim. So it can be inferred that once their numbers were great enough, the Nephilim were capable of breeding on their own to continue the species.
It should be noted that Lilith, mother of the Nephilim, grants Death the power to travel through time in Darksiders 2, inferring she herself can travel through time as well. So technically, it is maybe kinda sorta possible that both versions of the Nephilim's origins are true. If she traveled back in time to before the angels and demons were created, then made Absalom there, the Nephilim could be Old Ones. And since the reference to the Nephilim being Old Ones states that they were the creator's first warriors, not first creations, this could technically add up. But it wouldn't really make sense for a number of reasons, and the inference in that older reference is still that the creator made the Nephilim in that earlier version of history. Still, it is a fun tongue-in-cheek possibility for making the two disparate Nephilim origins line up.
Either way, though, the history of the Nephilim as a people coalesces after this, with Absalom, as the first and generally considered the most powerful Nephilim, standing as their leader. For reasons heretofore not entirely explained, Absalom and the Nephilim at some point begin a campaign of destruction, carnage, and death across the cosmos. The first world to fall to the Nephilim's fury was the world of the Ravaim, a race of creatures that, by comparison to the first and second kingdoms, the angels and demons respectively, was primitive. However, they possessed a unique capability to fashion tools, weapons, and the like using their very own flesh, presumably living or dead, and it was in fact for this very ability that the Ravaim were targeted. After the Ravaim were wiped from their existence, the plan, put forward by Death himself, was to use their bodies to create semi-sentient weapons of immense power called the Grand Abominations. The weapons were aptly named, as the Nephilim used processes so profane and horrible to create these weapons that the world of the Revium itself, on whose soil the weapons were formed, was warped into a disgusting, literally bleeding land, filled with rot and foulness so great that even hell itself was considered to be a less revolting place. The name Grand Abomination wasn't just appropriate because of what happened to the Revium's homeworld, however, as the corpses of the dead race were themselves forged into weaponry, items of such power that they were literally capable of destroying entire worlds. The creation of weapons of such power and magnitude would have been well beyond the Nephilim's capability were it not for the nature of the Revium themselves. The Nephilim used the Revium's flesh-crafting capabilities and somehow also managed to encapsulate all of the dead race's future potential, lost due to their early death, inside of the weapons they had created. Combined with this, intentionally or not, the Grand Abominations were still quasi-sentient, as earlier referenced, even in their transformed and murdered state, and as such they were aware of the horrors inflicted upon them. This fueled within each abomination a level of hatred for all things in creation so great that not even the most profane, vile, murderous, or heinous demon could compare. All of these factors combined to create arguably the most powerful, destructive, and dangerous weapons in all of creation.
Our creatures can't repel firepower of that magnitude.
So powerful, in fact, were the Grand Abominations that even the Nephilim were concerned. Not only did they build safeguards into each weapon so that no enemy could use the Grand Abominations against them, but the Nephilim constructed an immense, hidden, and powerfully warded vault in which all of the weapons were kept. They called it the Abomination Vault, and the Grand Abominations were only removed in such numbers and at such times as they were needed.
Using these weapons, their numbers, and their immense prowess in battle, the Nephilim waged war across the cosmos, destroying anything and everything in their path, until finally the Charred Council, self-proclaimed arbiters of the balance of creation, took notice, and deemed the Nephilim a threat to the balance. Fearing they were capable not simply of tipping the scales in favor of good or evil, law or chaos, but of shattering the balance entirely. At some point during their crusade, 4 of the Nephilim's number approached the Charred Council and made a pact with them, promising to act as the Council's enforcers to lead the charge against both their Nephilim brethren as well as any and all others who would threaten the balance, all in exchange for immense power. Thus, the 4 Horsemen of the Charred Council were born: death, strife, fury, and war. From that time on, the Horsemen rode against their former brethren, with the final battle and subsequent annihilation of the Nephilim occurring on the world of Eden. The Council, having judged that humanity would play a vital role in maintaining the balance of creation, had decreed that Eden, a lush, beautiful world, would be given to the humans as their home, and that heaven and hell would leave them be until they could contend with the first and second kingdoms on equal footing. Absalom and the Nephilim were infuriated at this decision, and marched on Eden to wipe out humanity and claim the world as their own. It has been posited that the search for a home was the entire original purpose for the Nephilim's crusade, and thus the source of their fury at a seemingly lesser race being gifted such a bountiful and beautiful world. Though we have no technical evidence to the contrary, this seems unlikely, as the Nephilim have clearly burned dozens, if not hundreds of worlds on their crusade by this point, making the argument that the Nephilim being simply a drifting people without a home sound rather weak and thin.
Thus ended the tale of the Nephilim. Or so most of the cosmos thought. True enough, the Nephilim survived in the form of the Horsemen, but theirs would be the legacy of the Council's writers thereafter, not the legacy of the Nephilim. So surely the Nephilim story was over, except it wasn't. Not quite. During the final battle on Eden, Absalom, eldest of the Nephilim, engaged Death, eldest of the Four Horsemen, in single combat, a duel from which Death would rise victorious. But instead of merely dying, lying there in a pool of his own blood, Absalom oozed a black ichor, creating a pool of black muck that sucked him into it, despite Death's attempts to pull him free. And then Absalom was simply gone.
As the centuries and even millennia passed, Absalom, not entirely dead, would suffer a fate not unlike the Grand Abominations, twisted into something almost unrecognizable and fueled by a hatred for all life. Absalom became the source of corruption, an idea and also a substance. In its strongest and purest form, it was a black, tar-like ooze. One in-universe citizen even thought that perhaps corruption was the opposite of life and creation itself, capable of only corrupting and destroying all life. It should be noted that at some point Absalom claimed to not be the source of corruption, merely its champion, but all other indications are that Absalom, firstborn test tube baby of the Nephilim, was in fact corruption's source. He would later be killed by Death, the same man who slew him once before, presumably cleansing creation of Absalom's corruption in the process. Immediately afterwards, the souls of the entire Nephilim race, which had been kept in secret by Death himself, would be used in an attempt to restore the race of humanity back to life after their premature destruction as seen in Darksiders 1. Thus finally ended the story of the Nephilim, leaving only the Four Horsemen remaining. At least, until the events of Darksiders 3 prove otherwise.
And that's pretty much the Nephilim. Darksiders take on a powerful race born from the mingling of angels and demons, and the race from which the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse were born. We hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave us a like, and if you have any feedback or ideas for other topics you'd like to see us cover, let us know in the comments down below. Plus, if you'd like to see more videos from us in the future, be they lore or let's play, please go ahead and hit subscribe.
And in the meantime, this has been Two Men and a Mic, signing off. Hey guys, you can click the link in the left for our last lore video.
You can click the link on the right for our last Let's Play.
And right here in the middle, that orb, you can hit that to subscribe.
Also, ring the bell if you want to be notified when we post a new video.
This is Two Men and a Mic. Thanks for watching.